It's a testimony to the absurdities of modern politics that Rachel Reeves remains in office, battered by scandal, tainted by accusations of deception, shackled to an economic strategy that inspires neither confidence nor enthusiasm. The Labour government, so desperate to prove its credibility on fiscal matters, finds itself burdened with a Chancellor whose own credibility is evaporating by, I was going to say by the day, but actually by the minute. The question is not whether Reeves can last until the next election, but whether she can possibly stagger through to the end of this month. Trust in politics is a fragile thing, and Reeves has cultivated an image of steely pragmatism, but revelations about her past, about her CV, cast a long shadow. And the BBC's investigation into her tenure at Halifax Bank of Scotland has raised uncomfortable questions about her use of expenses, her alleged involvement in a murky internal investigation, gifts purchased on the company's credit cards, handbags, perfume, wine, may not amount to financial impropriety on the grander scale, but they feed into a broader perception that Rachel Reeves is a politician willing to be economical with the truth when it serves her interests. And that, frankly, she comes across as cheap. And adding to this controversy surrounding her CV, which it turns out has been somewhat airbrushed, the discrepancy over her departure date from the Bank of England, initially claimed to be December 2006, but in reality March 2006, might seem a minor administrative error, but which is what she's claimed, but combined with the earlier misrepresentation of her H-boss role as that of an economist rather than a retail banker, it contributes to the image of a politician with a tenuous relationship to reality. And in an era when public trust in politicians is at a historic low, this sort of misstep is politically fatal. So Keir Starmer's unwavering support for Reeves is as telling as it is desperate. When pressed on whether the Chancellor could be trusted, Starmer's spokesperson issued a one-word response: yes. And given the deluge of revelations, that confidence looks misplaced, doesn't it? While Starmer remains loyal for now, Labour strategists will be calculating whether her continued presence in the Treasury is a net political liability. But equally, who wants to take over? Who wants to inherit the poisoned chalice that she has been concocting? Starmer's government, having positioned itself as the antidote to the sleaze and the economic mismanagement of its Conservative predecessors, can ill afford to have been sheltering a Chancellor with a credibility deficit. This scandal has yet to reach its crescendo, and if more revelations emerge, which they probably will, the Prime Minister may find that his steadfast support turns into a serious political liability. Even if Reeves is pushed out, who would be willing to inherit this mess that she's created? Labour's economic agenda, already precariously balanced, is built on promises of stability, growth, fiscal responsibility, yet the UK economy remains sluggish, and the headroom Reeves once promised to maintain is vanishing under the weight of weak growth forecasts and rising inflation. Tax rises are now being openly discussed, despite earlier assurances that Labour had no plans to increase the tax burden on working people. Should she be forced to resign, her successor will face an unenviable task. The economic outlook is bleak, and with the Office of Budget Responsibility set to downgrade its growth projections, what can a new Chancellor do? Except turn up at the dispatch box and say, here's more grim talk. The bond markets, ever skittish, are pricing in a tougher fiscal environment, and speculation is mounting that Reeves may have to raid savings vehicles such as ISAs to plug the holes in her fiscal strategy. The bitter irony is that whoever follows her will have to enforce the very tax increases and spending cuts Reeves has been attempting to avoid. Perhaps the most damning aspect of this entire saga is Reeves' response. Rather than addressing the concerns head-on, she has attempted to dismiss them as administrative oversights or media exaggerations. Her insistence that she will be judged by her current role is just sort of fantasy, isn't it? She voters are unlikely to separate her insistence that her past mistakes are irrelevant. In other words, that's a political gamble which voters will not accept. They're not likely to separate her past life and her present one. Character and trustworthiness are tied together. They're central to leadership. And once those are undermined, either with a dodgy CV or with an incompetent performance, and she seems to have both of these, recovery is near impossible. This is a Chancellor who, rather than restoring confidence in the Labour government's economic stewardship, has instead become a distraction and a liability, a politician at war with her own past, her own record, and increasingly the expectations of her own party. Labour's credibility on the economy is too important for Starmer to risk it on a Chancellor whose credibility is itself crumbling. It may not be a question of if she's replaced, but when, and whether the Labour leadership will act before the damage becomes irreparable. The only thing in Labour's favour here is the Conservatives don't have an alternative.